Your phone buzzes. You glance down before you've even decided to. There's nothing urgent. You put it back in your pocket. 30 seconds later, you check it again. This feels like a modern failure. A lack of willpower, maybe. Or too much screen time. Or a culture that broke your attention span. But the real answer is far stranger. The urge pulling your hand towards your pocket right now is not new. It is older than agriculture. Older than language. It was built into you by millions of years of ancestors who survived precisely because they could not stop checking. To understand why, you have to go back to a wooden box in a university basement in the 1950s. Inside the box was a pigeon. The psychologist B.F. Skinner had built it to test something simple. If a pigeon pecked a lever, sometimes a pellet of food would drop. Skinner tried different patterns. Sometimes food came every single time the pigeon pecked. Sometimes it came only after a fixed number of pecks. And sometimes it came at random, unpredictable intervals, no matter how many times the bird tried. You would expect the random version to discourage the pigeon. No pattern, no certainty, no clear reward for effort. Instead, the opposite happened. Pigeons on the random schedule pecked harder, longer, and more obsessively than pigeons who got a guaranteed reward every time. Skinner called this a variable ratio schedule. It turned out to be one of the most powerful behavioral patterns ever discovered. Certainty bores the brain. Uncertainty hooks it. Your brain is running the same basic program right now. Every time you check your phone, you don't know what you'll find. Maybe nothing. Maybe a message that changes your day. That uncertainty is not a flaw in the design of your phone. It is the entire design. But why would a brain evolve to crave uncertainty in the first place? Wouldn't a smart animal prefer the sure thing? This is where a neuroscientist named Wolfram Schultz comes in. In the 1990s, Schultz recorded the activity of dopamine neurons in monkeys while they waited for rewards. Dopamine had long been called the brain's pleasure chemical. Schultz found that wasn't quite right. The neurons didn't fire most strongly when the reward arrived. They fired most strongly when the reward was uncertain. The chemical wasn't rewarding pleasure. It was rewarding prediction error, the gap between what you expected and what actually happened. An unpredictable outcome lit up the brain far more than a predictable one, even when the predictable one was guaranteed. In other words, your brain isn't built to chase rewards. It's built to chase the feeling of not quite knowing what's coming next. Now picture an early human forager, tens of thousands of years ago, walking through unfamiliar terrain. Food is not delivered on a schedule. It is scattered, hidden, and unpredictable. One berry bush might be empty. The next might be full. A forager who got discouraged after one empty bush and stopped looking would starve. A forager who kept checking, kept scanning the next ridge, the next clearing, the next sound in the grass, was the one who found the food, avoided the predator, and survived long enough to have children. Evolution did not select for patience. It selected for restlessness, for the itch to check one more spot, just in case. That itch is sitting in your chest right now every time your phone screen goes dark. Food wasn't the only thing your ancestors couldn't stop checking. Information about other people mattered just as much, sometimes more. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar studied primate groups and noticed something. Apes spend enormous amounts of time grooming each other, not just for hygiene, but to maintain social bonds and track alliances. Dunbar argued that as early human groups grew larger, physical grooming couldn't keep up. There were too many relationships to maintain with touch alone. Language, he proposed, evolved partly as a faster, more efficient form of grooming, a way to exchange social information at a distance. In plain terms, gossip. Who is trustworthy? Who is dangerous? Who just had a baby, lost a fight, or made an enemy? Knowing this wasn't idle curiosity. In a group of roughly 150 people, the typical size Dunbar calculated for stable human communities, this information could be the difference between being protected by your tribe or being left out in the cold, literally. So your ancestors evolved two intertwined hungers, a hunger for unpredictable resources and a hunger for unpredictable social information. Berries and bones on one hand, status and gossip on the other. Both hungers rewarded constant low-effort checking of the environment. Now hold that thought and look at the device sitting next to you. Every notification on your phone is a tiny modern berry bush. It might be empty, it might be full. You don't know until you check, and checking costs you almost nothing. No walk across the savannah, no risk of a predator, just a flick of the thumb. This is not an accident. The researcher Natasha Schultz spent years studying the design of slot machines in Las Vegas for her work on what she called the machine zone, the trance-like state gamblers enter when play becomes automatic. She found that machine designers deliberately built in Skinner's variable ratio principle, tuning the unpredictability of payouts to maximize the amount of time a person stayed seated and playing. The same logic, almost identically, sits behind the notification systems on your phone. Unpredictable likes, unpredictable replies, unpredictable scrolls that occasionally surprise you and mostly don't. You are not weak for checking it. You are exquisitely well designed for an environment that no longer matches the one you were built for. Here is the strange part most people miss. Your ancestors' foraging instinct had a built-in limit. Real bushes ran out. Real ridges took effort to climb. The environment itself rationed how often you could check, simply because checking cost time and energy. Your phone removed that limit entirely. The same ancient hunger now has access to an infinite number of bushes, all reachable in under a second, all glowing in your pocket at 2 in the morning. So what feels like compulsion is really an old, useful survival mechanism operating in a world it was never calibrated for. The forager who checked constantly was the one who lived. The forager who checked too rarely starved quietly, somewhere off camera, leaving no descendants to inherit their patience. You are descended from the checkers, not the calm ones. This doesn't mean you're stuck. Understanding the mechanism is itself a kind of power. When you notice the urge to check your phone with nothing actually waiting for you, you're not witnessing a personal flaw. You're watching a 2-million-year-old foraging algorithm fire in response to a screen. Naming it can loosen its grip, the same way naming a shadow on the wall makes it stop looking like a monster. Some researchers studying digital behavior now recommend making the unpredictability visible again, deliberately, turning off badges, batching notifications into scheduled checks instead of constant interruptions. Not because willpower will fix an evolutionary instinct, but because changing the environment changes what the instinct has to respond to. You cannot delete the forager in you. You can change the terrain it's foraging in. Your phone buzzes again. This time you notice the urge before you act on it. You don't fight it, exactly. You just see it for what it is. Not a flaw in you, not a failure of discipline, but the oldest, most reliable survival reflex your species ever built, reaching for a horizon that was never supposed to be within arm's length, lit up and waiting all night long. Do like and subscribe for more such videos.